Welcome to Alternative Investments Chat,
where we demystify the world of alternative investments and financing for entrepreneurs and investors alike.
With these discussions, we hope you're more empowered to unlock opportunities in your business or portfolio. I'm Erin.
And I'm Erica. Let's get started.
Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about how to diversify your portfolio a little bit more with something fun, alcohol.
My favorite. Booze. No, I'm just kidding. No, like many other of the asset classes that we discuss on this podcast, this particular asset class is gaining popularity for a whole host of reasons, and we'll dive into a few of those in a moment. So according to an article in GSB Global, wine investments have outperformed global equities in the past decade. The London International Vintners Exchange, or LiveX 1000, this is an index that tracks 1,000 of the world's most traded fine wines, gained 29.5% over the 18 months through the end of March.
Wow, that's impressive. Yep. Wine, though, isn't the only alcohol that might be worth looking at. Rare whiskey and fine spirits have become top-performing luxury items, which is cool. Yeah. Rare whiskey is becoming the best-performing luxury asset, appreciating by 280%, even beating the S&P 500 over the past 10 years.
It's absolutely wild. When I saw this, whiskey was actually at the very top of the list of the most well-performing asset classes. I was like, this is so crazy to me.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But, we all know that not all alcohol is created equal.
Right.
So when we talk about investing in wine first, then we'll kind of dive into the rare whiskeys. We need to understand what that actually means. This isn't that lovely $2 chuck that you pick up off the bottom shelf.
Yeah, or like Fleischmann's at a frat party.
Gross. First of all, whoever named that, not.
It's like Fleischmann's or Fleischmann's, however you want to say it. I've heard it both ways.
Ugh, gross. It reminds me of Boone's Farm. That was ours.
That was yours.
Strawberry Fields, Boone's Farm. Yeah. So that is not worth investing in. So when we say wine, we mean investment grade wine. So this refers to high quality wines with the potential to appreciate in value over time due to a few things: their rarity, their aging potential, and then their strong demand in the secondary markets.
Wow. Yeah. Very interesting. You're definitely right about that. Investment grade wines are typically produced in prestigious wineries, as you might expect, with a proven track record of price appreciation and critical acclaim. These renowned regions include, and most of these you've probably heard of before, Bordeaux, Burgundy, Champagne, Napa Valley, Tuscany, and Rhone Valley.
Yes.
So in addition to the superior region in which they're grown, these wines are also produced by top-tier wineries. Yes. So also not every winery in every location is made equal as well, right? So we're going to do our best with some pronunciations here. We have Chateau Lafite Rothschild, France. Domaine de la Romanie Conti, France. Screaming Eagle, Napa Valley. Doesn't get more American than that. Yep. And Sasaya in Italy.
Yeah, those are four of the big winemakers. If you can get a bottle from them, you're doing good.
Yeah.
In fact, I have a girlfriend who, this is what she does as her job, is she sells high-end wines to clients. And they had a retreat just yesterday. On her Instagram, she posted a bottle of the Domaine de la Romanie, the Conti. I was like,
you're jealous?
I was just staring at my phone, just drooling over it. I can't only imagine what it tastes like. It's that wine is so expensive and so
coveted
rare.
Bottle.
Okay, back focus here. So there are a few other qualities in addition to the region and the winemaker that push these wines into that investment category.
Right.
And again, the one thing that I just mentioned is scarcity and limited production play a huge role. So some of these wines are produced in small quantities under strict allocations, or just they have extremely low annual production, which increases the rarity. You know, sometimes if you could only pull a certain amount of grapes from one of these famous regions and then one of these winemakers makes it, that's all you have.
Right.
So it depends on the growing season.
Yeah.
So something else to always consider is that fine wine is a consumable asset.
Mm-hmm.
So as bottles are opened over time, the availability decreases, again, driving up the value.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't drink your watches or your shoes, but there are, you know,
shouldn't.
if you shouldn't,
Yeah, maybe avoid that.
You're going to open, especially for really special occasions. I remember that when we captured Osama bin Laden, the sommelier said he'll open this bottle, this magnum of champagne. They did. I think it was one of one.
Mm-hmm. And where was that?
That was in Monterey at the Sardine Factory.
Oh,
They have
okay.
one of the best sommeliers like in the world. Like he's a gold, I don't even know, gold jacket, whatever it is. Sorry to my sommelier friends. I don't know the levels, but he is like a master sommelier and it's really, really awesome. Okay, so another quality that pushes those wines, again, like we said, is the rating. So who tells you if it's good wine?
Not me or you.
Hey, I like everything. That's a lie.
Yeah,
I 100% will drink anything and not even complain about it. But they have wine critics and publications that tell us who's there or what wines are there. There's Robert Parker's Wine Advocate
Okay.
and Wine Spectator. So these two names are synonymous with wine and the wine score. So you're going to hear, I mean, I grew up when I've worked in restaurants my whole life. Anyone who had a decent wine list, I knew about these two publications because this is like the deciding factor.
Right.
And so depending on which guide you're actually referring to, 95 points to 100 is extraordinary.
Wow.
So anything that's listed in that small 5 points, that's probably going to be your investment wine, not what you're going to drink on a Friday night with Taco Bell.
Right. And probably not anything you can get at a regular grocery store.
Yeah. Sometimes you can, but it's very rare, but who knows?
Yeah.
Depends on the grocery store, I guess.
Yeah, depends. But so now that we understand what investment grade wine is, let's explore some different ways that you can actually invest.
Yeah.
And you can invest in wine in lots of different ways, as you can imagine, depending on the investor's capital, how much money they have, their risk appetite, and their level of involvement. First way to invest, of course, is direct investment. Yep. This means that you actually are purchasing the bottles and you are holding them as they appreciate. There are several ways to purchase direct. You can visit prestigious wineries and purchase directly from them. Mm-hmm. I will say usually that requires having a personal relationship with the winery. You can't typically just show up at like Harlan and like get some wine. Like that's usually not something you can do. Yeah. You have to build that relationship. But another thing you can do is acquire wine via auctions, wine merchants, brokers, or retailers. But something to consider and remember is that professional storage in a bonded warehouse is required in order to house these wines, store these wines. And you do need insurance and provenance tracking in order to retain the value of that wine. If you just are holding on to a bottle of wine and maybe it's just sitting, on your counter, it's probably not going to hold its value. It won't hold its value. Yeah. So that's an option for somebody who wants to be hands-on. There are some people who are really passionate about that. They want to be a part of the, storage process. So that's an option. But what about investors that don't want to be a storage facility?
That's a great question. I love having wine on hand because I have problems, but
to drink
again, that's a whole different podcast. Coming later this fall. No, I'm just kidding. That I love having wine and I lived in Montecito and then I also lived in Northern California right outside of San Jose. We were 2 hours away from Napa Valley. I've been up there many a time. So being able to go to those wineries, like you said, is awesome. But having to track that all back home and then finding lovely homes within my home for it is, my wine shelf is to it's at capacity. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Sure.
So I would probably prefer a hands-off approach. I'll buy the cheap stuff, drink it at home, but the good stuff, I'll let the other people do. And this is very common with tons of other asset classes. There's hands-on and hands-off options for everybody. So there are specialized wine investment platforms and funds that offer to manage your wine portfolio, which I think is cool. Very cool. If you're looking for managed wine portfolio, here are some great platforms that can help you. And their names always make me laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Cult Wines,
Love.
VinoFest, Wine Cap, and Vendum.
Ooh, okay.
I like that one, right? So these platforms provide curated wine investment services that include handling the purchasing,
Mhm.
storage, and the sell.
Very
So
cool.
they do it all. You don't have to worry about getting the storage unit or anything like that. And investors can choose their risk level and investment timeframes. Again, these platforms allow for a lot of mix and match and flexibility. Exactly. And then there's also wine funds. So wine funds, they're structured like hedge funds, meaning these funds pull capital to invest in a diversified portfolio of fine wines. So investing this way typically requires a higher minimum, though.
Okay.
What from my research, I found anywhere from like $10,000 to $100,000 or more.
Right. Good chunk.
Yeah, and the fund's performance is though subject to management fees.
Mm-hmm.
Again, always think about that. And then liquidity can vary. So some funds have lock-in periods before withdrawal periods. So you're like, hey, we can cash you out, but after 5 years. So again, making sure that you're reading all the fine print when you're investing.
Yes, of course. So if we're continuing on the hands-off approach, if you can believe it, there's also wine stocks and ETFs.
Of course.
So investors who want exposure into the wine industry without owning the physical bottles, without storing them, without getting involved, can invest in publicly traded companies, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
The LVMH is a French multinational holding company and luxury conglomerate that houses the names you might have heard: Louis Vuitton, Dior, and Fendi, as well as high-end alcohol in their catalog. This includes, again, some names that you have probably heard: Moët & Chandon, Dom Perignon, Veuve Clicquot, and Hennessy.
Yeah.
Hennessy.
Yep.
So now, remember, when you invest via this route, you are exposed to market risks, as always.
Stock market, it's an IPO, so.
Yes, but there's higher liquidity, which can be really attractive to people, as opposed to owning all of these physical bottles. If you need to liquidate that obviously takes a lot more time. So could be a good fit.
Yeah, so that is like a most perfect segue into other risks that come with this asset class. So earlier you mentioned storage. So fine wine must be stored in optimal conditions.
Right.
If not stored, wine can degrade, making it unsellable or significantly reducing its value. What's the point of buying an expensive bottle of wine, sticking it in a closet somewhere, forgetting about it, and be like, oh, look, I forgot about this. No one's going to buy that. They want to know the details.
Yeah,
if
you
like,
wasted your money.
It was in a closet. They're like, oh, thanks. You can put it back in your closet now. Professional storage is always available, but remember it comes with fees and can eat into those returns.
Right.
Always remember that. Another risk is that just the general risks in investing in all asset classes: liquidity, time horizon, and accessibility.
Right.
But there is one risk that comes with only a few of these alternative asset classes.
Sure.
Mainly with tangible assets.
Yes.
And that is
fraud. Yes. Fine wine market has a history of counterfeits, which is interesting.
I know.
I think about like counterfeit bags, counterfeit shoes. I don't really think about counterfeit wine. So I'll tell you about a famous case in a second. We'll get to that. But we mentioned provenance. Provenance is the history of ownership and storage conditions. It's basically verifying that you got it where you came from, you've been storing it properly, blah, blah, blah. It must be verifiable in order for it to maintain its value. Artwork and artifacts often require provenance as well, which makes sense. In fact, many museum curators and experts spend time researching the provenance to understand the ownership history of an item, which can shed a light on the significance and credibility of the item. If you know where it came from, if you're able to keep track of that, and you know that it's one of one or whatever, that makes it more rare, drives up the value. So fraud case. Let's get into it.
I need to hear this.
Rudy Kurniawan, an Indonesian-born wine collector, faked rare wines using cheaper bottles and reprinted labels. You wouldn't think it'd be that easy.
I know.
He produced the counterfeits at home.
This case always I get a big grin because I'm like, this is wild.
It's crazy. Blending wines to mimic expensive vintages which is so funny because it's like, you have these sommeliers, not to,
Yeah.
talk badly about any sommeliers. I know they work really hard, but it is just funny that he got this far, right? Because you would think people would be able to taste it and be like, this isn't right.
Well, all I think about is he had to have trained his palate if he would have just put that to
Maybe
good
just
use.
be a winemaker. Right, exactly. So it's estimated that he was able to sell over $30 million in fraudulent wine.
So crazy.
Nuts. So thankfully, eventually, the wine experts and wineries spotted the inconsistencies, realized something weird was going on.
Yeah.
And in 2012, the FBI raided his home and found all of the counterfeit labels, corks, and the blending equipment. Just left the evidence out for everyone to find.
Come on in.
Exactly. So in 2014, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison and was ordered to pay $28.4 million in restitution.
Jeez.
But after serving his sentence, he was deported back to Indonesia. So
Poor dude.
Poor guy. I mean, maybe don't do that, but it is kind of a silly thing to think about.
Again, I've heard this case many times and it's just always wild to me. I just think to myself, man, this guy has, Robert, you have way too much time on your hands, my friend. Get a different hobby, Get
a different hobby.
Yeah, exactly. So while fraud is definitely out there, we've seen it. There are double the amount of case studies that prove that investing in wine can actually be extremely lucrative.
Sure.
So Burgundy and Napa cult wines have seen the highest appreciation due to scarcity and prestige. So that Romani Conti Grand Cru that we were talking about earlier, in 2013, you could purchase a bottle for the small price of $10,000. Small price, $10,000 a bottle. In 2023, that bottle was worth $30,000 to $40,000.
Wow.
So that's 200 to 300% increase, right? That's
impressive.
Wild. And then if we want to stick it back into the United States, the 2010 Screaming Eagle from Napa Valley, same thing. 2013, $2,000 a bottle. 2023, $6,000 to $8,000 a bottle. Global demand for high-end wines just keeps increasing, and it's causing this to become a stronger investment class as we continue to go through this.
Yes. So we've talked a lot about wine. Let's talk a little bit about liquor. We want to touch on some of these spirits that are also helping diversify portfolio that we mentioned earlier in the episode. So purchasing limited edition bottles of premium spirits is one way to invest as well. Some rare bottles can appreciate as much as 100 to 300% over a decade. So big returns there. Investors can also purchase whiskey, rum, or other spirit casks from distilleries and brokers. There's a time horizon to take into account with this method. Investors are going to have to let that cask mature for 5 to 10 years before it's going to be ready to reap those returns. But just like wine, these methods are some hands-on approaches. All other offhand approaches we mentioned earlier about wine are pretty much identical when it comes to liquor.
Yeah, they all stick in the same. So there are pros and cons of investing in this asset class, and they're all, again, almost the same as wine as well. But here's some very, very notable premium spirits that have experienced significant value appreciation.
Okay.
So there's Macallan Fine and Rare from 1926.
1926.
Right? 2013, $75,000 a bottle.
Wow.
In 2023, $2.7 million.
Oh my gosh.
Pappy Van Winkle's Family Reserve of 23 years, 2013. Retail, you could buy it for $250.
Okay.
Now on the secondary market, it was about $1,200.
Okay.
2023, $6,000 to $8,000 for this bottle.
Should have bought that Pappy.
Yeah, I know. For $250, you could have made some good money. In fact, there's a wonderful documentary on Netflix called Heist, and I think it's episode 5 and 6 that actually talks about Pappygate.
Funny.
Yes. There was an inside man that was supposedly stealing like 200 bottles. They just disappeared and they couldn't figure it out.
That's crazy.
Could you imagine buying 200 bottles of Pappy or stealing them and then selling them for $8,000 a piece?
Yeah, that's good money there.
That's definitely a good chunk of change.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds like I've got some Netflix to catch up on.
Yeah, there you go.
But that wraps up our episode for today about wine and other alcohol that you can invest in.
Well, Erin, like a perfectly mixed cocktail, we hope this information helps our listeners shake up some new ideas on where they can invest.
I love that. Yes. Don't forget to like and subscribe and catch us next time. We're going to be talking a little bit more about alcohol, specifically wineries, meaderies, and distilleries in the next episode. So keep listening if you're interested.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for more insight on our next episode.
And don't forget to subscribe to continue the Alternative Investments chat.
See you next time.
Content provided in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional, financial, or investment advice. This podcast should not be construed as an offer to sell or a solicitation of any offer to buy any securities. We strongly recommend that you seek advice from a qualified professional before making any financial decisions.